Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Bishop Bryan Ouellette coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this November 16th, 2018 for Vestiges After Dark. Tonight we will be talking about Reiki. It is a subject that has been asked of me, going back weeks now. People wanting my opinion on it as both a Catholic exorcist as well as a bishop. And I've had quite a few words about this on Twitter and shared many of my thoughts there. And I will have to say that there is nothing that is quite as controversial as when I talk about this subject. So much so that one of the followers on Twitter was not too happy with some of my opinions on it, and I invited her on the show to talk about it. Hopefully we'll be able to connect tonight and have a bit of a discussion about Reiki. Don't go away. Well, welcome back, everybody, to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I hope you are all having a wonderful evening. I apologize for my voice being a little bit raspy. The exorcism on Sunday was an intense one, and it took a lot out of me, mostly my voice, and that's pretty typical because I do a lot of yelling and screaming through the entire 2 or 3 hour process of it. And so, yes, it's the one almost regular casualty. And it wasn't terribly strong to begin with because I had just gotten over laryngitis several weeks before. And it just is the way it is. So hopefully you can hear me tonight and there aren't any issues with that. Welcome to everybody in the chat room. I just wanted to say to Sister Kateri out there, we were going to try to have her moderate, but Spreaker doesn't seem to offer an option to make a member of the chat room a moderator. So I apologize if we have some dissenters in there. I will try to keep notice and block them as it becomes or it comes to my attention. But you know, it is what it is. There's not too much I can do about that. If you see it, just keep mentioning in the chat room. Maybe it'll get my attention, or at least it might get Joy's attention. She tends to follow the chat a little more closely. And speaking of which, Joy, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I've seen better days.
Yeah, you're not feeling too well. I understand.
Yeah, I think everybody knows I've had surgery this week.
Yeah.
To get a kidney stone removed, and the recovery has not been all that great.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm hanging in there.
Well, you know, it's pretty impressive that you were able to make the show tonight. I appreciate that. I know the audience does. And, you know, we've got a good topic here tonight, so hopefully you'll be able to make it. We'll try not to go the full 2 hours, but hopefully, you know, we'll be able to cover as much as we possibly can tonight, and everything that's necessary about this topic, because it is an important one. It's something, like I said, comes up often on Twitter. It creates a lot of controversy. I've even talked to other podcast hosts, talk show hosts about the subject who are in agreement with my position on the field of study. And, we all have had our experiences with how controversial this can be. But we will hopefully be able to shed some light on it tonight. I feel, you and I are both more than qualified to do so. But there is a guest that we're going to try to bring on. You guys know, Skype has been a perpetual thorn in my side. Before the show, we tried to connect with the guest just so that we would have her on the air. And it did not work. I mean, we could hear her, but she could not hear us. And so I don't know how that's going to pan out as we move further into the evening, but we are going to try to have her call into Skype here in just a moment to see if that fixes the issue. So before we even get started with talking with the guests, I would just like to set a preface here for how this came about and why we're doing the show this way. Essentially, several weeks ago, I was asked a question on Twitter regarding the nature of Reiki. And I'm a critic of it. I don't really like it. I don't feel it is a safe practice. Not because Reiki in and of itself is a problem, but the way that it is practiced today is dangerous. Well, the guest that we have on tonight, her name is Kyla, disagreed with this. And she went on to patronize me a little bit, saying that I didn't have all my facts straight, that I don't know about as much about it as I think I do, even going as far as to suggesting that, because Zach, quote-unquote, made me famous, now I have a responsibility to what I say, and because people are listening, and I have to be more careful. But, I mean, I've been on the air for a long time, long before I was on Ghost Adventures. And, being careful is, I think, more than careful would describe how I go about handling these topics. As an exorcist, as a bishop, I have a responsibility to talk about things that are safe and not safe. And I think I'm actually quite balanced and fair in a lot of ways. I'm not very, I've never even really been ultra critical of things like a Ouija board. Basically, I'm all about personal responsibility. So if you want to get involved in something that's of an occult nature, be sure you know what you're getting involved in. And that's my biggest problem with Reiki. Everybody knows the Ouija board's dangerous. Everybody. That's never called into question. But most people think Reiki is safe. It's just as dangerous. But our guests will probably disagree with that. So what we're going to do, something that we don't usually do in our format, but we're going to see if this works. Hopefully. We're going to take a short little break, and we're going to try to connect with the guests and bring her on, and see if that works. I don't really know if it will, but it's a crapshoot tonight. When you work with Skype, it's always a crapshoot. So we're going to be right back here in just a moment. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back, everybody. I apologize. I don't know what Skype is doing, but we were able to connect, but apparently it went over the airwaves even though everything was muted. So why it did that, I have no idea. So again, I apologize that we're having so many technical issues. But the good news is we were able to connect with Kyla despite the fact that for some reason the entire connection process was being broadcast. So Joy, can you hear me now? And now we lost Joy.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait. Okay, there you are. Okay.
Sorry.
And Kyla, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. See, this is why, I want everyone to know right now, this is why we don't take callers right now. Okay, because when we have tried, every time Joy and I have tried to take callers, and I know a lot of you are just dying for us to start taking callers, Skype betrays us, and this is just one of those things that we've had to deal with the way that it is organized to work with the Spreaker Studio system. And I'd have to probably switch to another platform in order to correct this. So I apologize again. I try to keep it, more professional than that, but I can only work with the equipment, and Skype is, ever since they did the update, it's been a mess. All right. So tonight we're talking about Reiki, and I already gave you a little bit of a heads up as to how this all got started. We were talking about it. People ask me all the time on Twitter about this subject. They're interested in my opinion of it. And I take, in this particular context, a very, I guess you could say, traditional Catholic opinion of it, because of some of the things that I've seen in my work, as well as some of the things that I have witnessed out there within the range of the field of metaphysics, because I sort of walk the tightrope between both worlds as both a Catholic exorcist and a metaphysician. So I guess I want to start by discussing what Reiki is. And I think we can all be in agreement that Reiki is a Japanese healing technique, an alternative medicine, if you will, very similar in relationship to acupuncture, utilizing the same idea of chi and energy work within the human body, only unlike acupuncture where they use needles to stimulate the various meridian points. Reiki uses simply just one's hands hovering over the body and the direction of energy. And so one of the things that I think is important to note about this is that Reiki has basically a schism within it. It started as a traditional practice in Japan, and then sort of came to the West, and then it changed and became somewhat diluted. And then there were more branch offs as people adopted the title of Reiki Master, and then they created their own programs, all the way down to where we now have people saying that they can make you a Reiki Master in 48 hours. Go to this, training, pay $30, and you're a Reiki Master. The original traditional form would have never accepted that, and so I want to make it very clear that when I voice a criticism on social media or anywhere that I give a public opinion on this, when I talk about Reiki in a critical way, I'm really more or less referring to the Western deviations and not really about the traditional formula. Because I do have a great deal of respect for Eastern medicine. And I do feel that Usui, who's the person who developed this, I believe in the 19th century, or was it the 1900s?
It was 1914.
Okay, so the 1940s, so the 20th century, 1900s, and so this was a Japanese man, studied many different disciplines, predominantly Buddhism and meditation, various Eastern occult techniques, and also Chinese medicine, where you have a strong focus on energy work. Thus, why we can relate this somewhat to a certain degree to acupuncture. That particular practice takes years, and there's a mentorship involved. You don't just go to a seminar and become a master. You would, in the Japanese system, you would actually study under somebody who has that master designation, and then slowly train through field work up to the point where eventually you would be declared a master by your master. That's not really what happens too much anymore. Not that saying that it doesn't happen; it does, but it doesn't really happen too much anymore in the West. In Western,
it's like they just took out the apprenticeship.
Yes, and went right into the core material and the attunements. And so my first criticism, just so I want to get this set, and then, Kyla will give you a chance to talk about, why you support Reiki as a practice. I just want to make sure that it's understood that I don't have any problem with the Japanese formula. My criticism is strictly of the Western deviations and their lack of regulation. And it's not even regulated in the East. And perhaps it needs to be, because, it makes some pretty wild claims. I mean, I think Joy was doing some research, and we were talking about this a few weeks ago. There was one claim that she came across that stated that Reiki can heal broken bones, and there was a few other things. Cancer. What were some of the other ones that you noticed? Do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it seemed to be a little far-fetched. It really just, it didn't seem like the kind of things that energy work would heal. Because I have done energy work myself. I have had energy work done on me, and I know, the kinds of things that energy work can affect, and broken bones and cancer are not one of them. Those are things that require, those are things that require a physical aspect.
Right.
Because even though we have, the spirit and the physical are intrinsically linked, they're handled in different ways when we're healing them up.
Right. Now, when you are, one of the things that I've noticed also is that the sacrament of unction in the Catholic Church is that's our healing work. That's the one that a priest or a bishop would use or resort to when a person is sick. And I can tell you there would never be ever a claim that unction could heal a broken bone. Perhaps there could be a miracle with cancer, because cancer is a somewhat less tangible thing. You're not talking about an injury as much as you're talking about a dysfunction. So I would say I could accept that Reiki could heal a dysfunction. I don't see how it could heal like an injury that has immediate, an immediate reaction. In the sense that you get something. Now, maybe it could help to speed the process up. I could accept that. And I'm sure, there are some Japanese Reiki practitioners out there that would know exactly how to do this or how it would work. So my concern is really about the lack of regulation, the fact that anybody can declare anything and nobody's going to stop them. How do you know your particular Reiki master is a Reiki master? How do you know that his Reiki master was a Reiki master? How far back do you need to go to determine whether or not it was actually traced back to an authentic training program? And so when you start to have these deviations and people running with it, calling themselves masters, I have a problem with that, because I feel that not only cheapens Reiki for Reiki practitioners, but it also puts the public at risk. And I have seen some of this risk because we have had clients that have come to us asking for help because they went to they had some kind of illness. They went to a Reiki master, and Reiki was performed on them, and they developed a demonic attachment that they traced back to the Reiki. And they said they didn't have it prior to a ritual being performed. I guess they use various symbols that are not unlike, they're Japanese characters, but they're not unlike sigils, in which it's an invocation of sorts. And as you and I know, Joy, because we talk about it all the time in the show, evocations can produce unintended results. Different things can come through when you don't know how to invoke a particular spirit properly. And again, that gets back to regulation. It gets back to whether or not your quote-unquote Reiki master actually is a Reiki master, actually knows what they're doing. So I want to make that very clear before we get started here. I don't have a problem with authentic Reiki. I just feel that authentic Reiki in the United States is very hard to find. So with that being said, hopefully that takes some of the edge off of this discussion, that I'm not just, going all out on an attack against Reiki. I don't feel that Reiki is actually responsible for all of these clients that are reporting various demonic attachments. I feel it's malpractice. That's the result of it. People that think they know what they're doing, who do not know what they're doing something and having unintended results. So that's kind of where I'm at with this whole thing. So, Kyla, let's get started by, I guess, talking about what level of Reiki are you at, and how did you get involved with Reiki as a practice?
Well, actually, it started as a long journey, and this started when I was 14. And I'm 41 now, so I've had 25 years to study different healing methods and different spiritual energies. Being born a psychic medium, I've always had that connection with the other world. So I know good versus evil in the other, beyond the veil. And so with that, I started on a spiritual journey that led me through different types of healing, which is how I got involved and led to different teachers who would be able to bring me to my current level, which is Reiki Master. I'm also a pranic healer.
Okay, so
as well as an empath and clairvoyant, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So as far as Reiki Master, how long did you actually, when you started with Reiki, how long did it take you to get to the point where you were given master status, however that is done, whether it be through a Denju initiation or some other way?
And it actually took me a few years, about 3 years. I started first with the theological end of it and learning how to move energy and figure out ways or figure out the proper way to move energy from point A to point B, so to speak. Once I was able to do that, then I was led to, first I was led to pranic healing, which is a very intense cleansing of your chakra points.
Okay.
And then after I went to pranic healing, and I spent a weekend. Actually, I spent a weekend with the teacher at her house, and learned a lot from her over that weekend. So it was 24 hours a day for on 3 separate days. And then I went back home, and I was able to pick up more materials and basically do a lot of book learning. From that point, I went from the West Coast back to the East Coast. And while I was on the East Coast, I actually found a class that was a hands-on class, and it took 3 or 4 days for just the basic learning. But it was several hours, and it was hands-on, and it was a very small class, and we could ask all kinds of questions. She was actually a Catholic priest who had her learning from another Reiki master. So, in a sense, this went through the traditional methods coming from the traditional Japanese teaching, and it went very hands-on, very personal. There was no online class. There was no, you can do this in 48 hours. It takes, a lot of practice. Once we were able to learn the basics and practice on ourselves and practice on our friends and family, then we could seek more learning and go on from there. Unfortunately, I did not go back with her, but because of all of the other learning that I had already learned at that point, my next teacher said, "You are already a master at this. Why are you even coming to me?" And so she was able to finish that last little bit and bring me up to the master point at that point. And that was about 6 years ago.
Okay, so that sounds that it definitely is following more in line with the more traditional path, not so much the Western deviant path that I've been very critical of. And I do know that it exists. So, we're on the same page in that respect, because I do feel that these things require time. I know that even in some of the teachings that I provide, I think my students sometimes get frustrated with my pace because I take it very methodically. We go very, very slowly through the material, so that they can fully absorb and get to know each and every particular aspect of the material that I'm teaching. And I think that's necessary with anything that is of an occult or esoteric metaphysical nature. There are no instant results with it. It's all about process. And so I can have far more respect for what you just described than I would for this one site that I've been looking at here. I'm not even going to mention it because I don't want people going to it. But it basically says that you can become a Reiki master in it says, I'm going to read it word for word. It says you can easily become a Reiki master within 48 hours, 24 if you're really motivated. So in just a few short hours from now, you'll be healing yourself, your loved ones, friends and family, not forgetting your plants and animals too. For the fact is, Reiki is probably the gentlest, most powerful, easiest to learn healing art available in the world today, as well as being one of the most outstanding methods of personal and spiritual development. And now with this technique online system, probably the most affordable as well. So not only are they claiming that, for their little fee, you can become a master in 48 or 24 hours if you're motivated, but you can do it all online without even having to come in contact with anybody. So, that's when we start to get into real problematic, it's just, for me, I'm looking at this and you know what it reeks of? It reeks of how some churches will basically become diploma mills and hand out ordinations just by signing up. And I guess they will remain, hey, let's face it, it's a fact. The Universal Life Church, for example, You don't need any particular qualification. You just state your intention, and they send you an ordination certificate. They don't lay hands on you. There's no ancient ritual involved.
There's no intention involved.
There's no intention
You just because I did it years ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was, I think, in 1997.
Okay.
I signed up, and all I had to do was put my name in and what name I wanted to go by, what title I wanted to have, and that, poof, there you are.
Yes. Yeah. And this sounds like the Reiki version.
I think mine was a little bit more involved.
Yeah.
No, I got ordained through Universal Ministries, but mine was a little bit more involved. I had several email contacts before I was able to, quote unquote, be ordained. But
Right.
I also have had other reasons for wanting to get that as well.
I got you. Okay. Well, okay. So how do you, as a person who, spent years studying this, which I respect, and, how do you feel about these other quote unquote Reiki masters setting up these programs where you can just train in 48 hours and be called a master? How do you feel about that?
To be honest, it's a get-rich-quick scheme, and I wouldn't do it.
And see, so you and I are more in agreement than we thought.
Yes, we are. See, the thing is that I don't disagree with that whole point. I don't disagree with, that there is a danger out there. And I'm going to tell you exactly why I feel that way. You remember Zach bought that house in Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
And he made the documentary with Demon House. Being the psychic medium that I am, I'm very in tune in many different areas. Okay, so I can't really put a label on what I am because it's everything. Empath, free communication with spirit, like this, it's too long of a list to describe. But I can also see things and get things off of videotapes. And also with the universal mind, I was able to see wave upon wave upon wave of demonic infestations that have been coming through for the last 2 decades, which really sucks. But it got really bad around 2007. And the house that Zach bought in Gary, Indiana, was actually the portal where these demonic infestations were coming through. I honestly think that if he still owns the land, you need to go back to the land and bless it, beyond bless it, because it needs to be completely closed, and I don't think it's completely closed. But that is where they were coming from. They've infiltrated our police. They've infiltrated our government. They have infiltrated our cities, and it's moving up from there. And all of these demonic infestations are now spreading like wildfire. It is crazy. To the point where a couple of years ago, had some friends, we did an underground Facebook messaging only. We need to start a prayer chain, and we need to do this for 24 hours so it circles the globe so we can get a handle on these demonic infestations. And within the span of about 24 hours, we started off with about 7,500 people worldwide that were spreading this to their family, to their friends, letting them know at such and such a time in our time zone, we have to start praying. We have to do it for this entire period of time until it went to the next time zone, and they're on over the entire globe. Okay, so it doesn't surprise me that these demonic infestations are infesting absolutely every source of healing on the planet, from the Catholic religion to Reiki to doctors to Eastern medicine, Western medicine, wherever that healing is, these demonic forces are infiltrating it because they want people to die. They want people hurting each other. How many kids have been hit by school buses so far? I have to say it's there, and this is where I'm seeing it.
Well, I
So
don't
it
know.
doesn't surprise me.
I don't know what actually the status of that land is. To be honest, I've never been there, and Zach and I have never had any words about it. And so I don't know who he was working with at the time that he filmed the documentary, and what might have been done after the house was demolished. I really don't know. There could have been something done. There might not have been anything done. It's very hard for me to say. I'd have to ask him specifically about it, and it's just never come up. But, I mean, you posit an interesting notion there. There, in terms of an increase in infiltration. It's certainly not the first time I've heard even people within the Catholic Church talking about this, and we've seen obviously a disintegration of the integrity of religion, scandals, God knows what else is going on.
And even with healthcare, I mean, how many times have I said, these people just want me to die?
You have.
Just over and over again. Because
it's everywhere.
I mean, I got my kidney stone removed, but my gallstones are still there, and nobody's doing a thing about those. And it's a struggle because nobody wants to do anything, and I can't understand why they're not listening. And the only thing I can imagine is, either they're complete idiots and barely passed with a C, or there's some kind of demonic thing going on attacking the healing. And, that makes sense because demons are creatures of entropy. And so healing is an act of ectropy, where we're getting better. Instead of falling apart, we're coming back together. So where would demons attack first? In the healing arts.
Well, it's their natural predisposition to be destructive.
Yeah. Exactly.
Jean in the chat room makes an interesting comment. She says religious...
Go ahead.
Religious scandals are throughout all religions, but it is actually a very small percentage. And while she's correct in that statement, the fact is any small percentage is enough to be exploited by our press to the point that, after you read a few papers or watch the news a few times, you're going to think that there's a sexual predator in everybody's closet. So it becomes a larger than life, again, which is another tactic of the demonic, to get into your head and to instill you with fear, because that's its primary fuel. It lives off of that emotion, which fear, in a lot of ways, is the embodiment of entropy that Joy was talking about. It really, what is the result of witnessing one's own demise? What is the result of realizing one's pending demise? It tends to invoke a natural state of fear. You might even say that fear exists so that we strengthen our survival instinct, because what we fear tends to be what could be dangerous. What's dangerous can harm us. What can harm us can kill us. So it all gets back to the way our neurology works, which is built into the creation itself. So any little tiny scandal is enough to destroy an entire system. You don't really need much. You don't really need, you really only need 1,000 people out of, 1 million to wreak havoc and destroy the world. You don't need much. Destruction is much easier than creation. You can burn a house down with a match, but you're going to need a whole army of people to build one. You know what I mean? So there's some truth to what you're saying there that I can get behind, and it certainly resonates with my own experience. And I could see how it would attack various things of healing. My primary concern goes back to the lack of regulation. So I mean, what could stop me? Let's say I was an unscrupulous person, okay? And people accuse me of fraud all the time. Just because I am not Roman Catholic anymore. I was at one time, not anymore. Just because I don't use that title anymore. Now, all of a sudden, I'm a fraud because, Roman Catholic, priests can't get married. Priests can't have kids. Priests can't study tarot. They'll throw it all at me and use any little tiny bit of data they can find out about me to claim that I am not real. I'm not authentic. So it kind of comes with the work. And, of course, just recently with Ghost Adventures Live, we just did a show on that whole fiasco with, the rabbi saying the word script, and everybody ran with it and said, see, this is a fake show, and that must be a fake bishop. Ridiculous. If a little bit of Google searching would dispel any of those rumors almost instantaneously, but they don't want to spend any time doing it. They just want to get on Twitter or Facebook and just bash. That's what they want to do. Again, probably getting back to demonic influence. I see it all the time. I don't necessarily... I'm not going to say you're wrong, Kyla, about demons coming through a portal and in mass quantities. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm not going to say that I completely buy into that. But I will say that people are a lot weaker. So for me, I can't validate one way or the other whether or not there's demons coming through in mass quantities. What I can validate is that people don't seem to have the natural resistance to it anymore. And so I'm finding people are very easily swayed by even the most minute demonic interference. What used to be a wearing down of the person over the course of days, weeks, months, years, now it seems like people can just immediately succumb. So I don't know if that's because there's too many of them and not enough of us. I think it really has a lot more to do with this, with the secularization of society, which is in itself demonic because it's taken us away from focus on the divine and our prayer life and our relationship to the divine.
It's also removed us from our own spiritual nature. We can't tune ourselves to our own spiritual selves. And so we end up creating more demons as if there weren't enough to begin with.
Well, and that's really, I think, what a lot of us are doing, creating them, and they're manifesting as tulpas in the ether, and now we've got more to deal with. So in a sense, there is a portal. I think it's all coming through all of our indiscretion, for sure. Not saying that, again, I'm not saying Kyla's wrong about Demon House. I'm just saying that I can't validate that one way or the other, but what I can validate is that there are certain things that we're noticing, and weakness is one of the disconnect from God that Tara says is definitely one of it. Joseph Campbell once said that if you were to remove religion from society, society would fall apart. It would destroy itself. It would self-destruct. That's how vital and important religion is. The very word religion actually comes from the word religio, which is to bind. And what it means is to bind people together to a common purpose. And it was a social convention as well as a spirituality for the purposes of bringing us into unity, not tearing us apart as religion has been bastardized into doing. So now you have like the Christians against the Muslims, and you have the Muslims against the Sufis, and you've got, too many religious wars to count. And now the biggest war of them all is secularism against them all. Let's just wipe them all out. And that just further divorces us, further lends us vulnerable and takes us away from the truth. I don't really, let's get back to Reiki a little bit. I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but Reiki, one of the things that we are seeing, is that people are going to masters, people that are calling themselves masters, people that are claiming to have received some kind of attunement, some kind of initiation, a denju. I don't know whether or not they did or not, but they went to these masters. Some kind of healing work was performed on them, and they left with a attachment that grew into such a severity that now they needed an exorcism. And a lot of, not just me, but a lot of Roman Catholic exorcists have seen this same trend. And so much so that they are now warning against it, to stay away from Reiki, which is sad because, in a way they go after acupuncture too. But acupuncture has a great deal more formality and regulation to it, whereas Reiki does not. It's really seen as kind of like a pseudoscience, and as long as it's seen by the academia as a pseudoscience, they don't feel it's basically it's superstition. How do you regulate superstition? That's what they would say.
Yeah. And there's Jean asked in the chat room if Reiki masters in the West are licensed, and I don't believe so.
They're not.
And that's
Yes,
one of the problems.
Actually, I am licensed. I have licenses.
Oh, good.
Well, not by the
For all
government,
three
though. The government doesn't license.
No, but the government. But again, you said that it was a pseudoscience, so
Well,
it
that's
wouldn't
what I mean.
be done by the government. The government can't regulate it.
Well, what Jean's asking is licensed like as a medical doctor gets a license. Like you go to school, you get a degree as a medical doctor. You will even be called Dr. Whoever, but you wouldn't be able to practice medicine until you were licensed by the state to practice.
And you can get your license revoked, and you can't practice anymore.
Right, if you are found guilty of malpractice, where Reiki doesn't have any of those protections.
Right, and one of the things that I was thinking of...
I understand that.
And one of the things I was thinking of, when I was thinking back of, because Reiki started in 1914. If we think about where medical science was at that time, they were prescribing heroin for cough syrup. Yeah. They were giving cocaine for antidepressants. We've come a long way since then. I mean, they put a camera up my hoo-ha to see where the rock was, and then shot it with a ultrasound laser, and boom, it's gone. Right. That would have been science fiction 100 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's like Star Trek.
But now, it's common practice. And if we could look at this instead of seeing it as a pseudoscience, see the spiritual aspect of it, and actually acknowledge that, hey, science doesn't cover everything. We also have the spiritual nature we must address. Then maybe we could license people the same way we license doctors. But we have to get to a point in our evolution, in our mentality, to see that this is something that needs to be done. Because so as long as we think that the spiritual nature is something we're making up in our head, we're never going to find what healing actually is.
Well, you make a great point, and I look at even my own work as a very unconventional priest and bishop of a very unconventional church. But one of the roles of a pastor is pastoral counseling, which toes the line, with conventional psychotherapy. Most people who come for pastoral counseling would benefit from going to see a psychotherapist as well. Only they tend to choose a pastoral counselor because there's a spiritual component to their particular problem, and a secular psychotherapist might not fully understand that. But I can say that I could not just receive an ordination as a priest or a bishop or be consecrated a bishop and then start giving pastoral counseling. The government could actually come after me for that because it would be a misrepresentation. I would have to be running an actual parish community before I could do that. So, in a sense, even though priests aren't licensed by the government because the separation of church and state is also another factor to consider here. But what does come into consideration is whether or not you actually are a member of a real organization that actually has real services with actual real people showing up to them. And so a lot of the rules that the IRS sets down for churches, like the 501c3 designation, which gives us, complete tax exemption status. In order to get that, I had to prove to the IRS that we are a real church. Once I have been given that established designation, I could then start to practice as a pastoral counselor and start seeing clients and helping them on that level. Prior to that, it would not have been appropriate for me to do so, and I didn't, because, again, it comes down to how society looks at the various regulations. So this is not to discredit Reiki or those people that have done it the right way. But what it does mean is that there is a need for extreme caution in this. You can't just go on Google and type in local Reiki master and give them a call and hope that things are going to turn out well. If you're going to go this route, you need to do your research. So you need to find out who they are. You need to interview them. You need to determine, where did they get their credentials? How did they get their credentials? What lineage do they belong to? In order to further protect yourself, to make sure that the person that you're talking to actually knows what they're doing. I'll give you a little story once. When I was in Las Vegas many years ago, I was working in a place with an individual that was a Reiki master, a so-called Reiki master. Still question his claim there, but that's what he said he was. And I was suffering from migraines. I've suffered from migraines for most of my life. I still suffer from migraines. Acupuncture was perhaps the most effective treatment I've ever received against it. But I would literally need to be going all the time, and I don't. Why? Because I can't find for the life of me a classically trained Chinese acupuncturist. I had to go to the Bahamas a few months ago in order to find one, and finally was able to get 2 sessions done. But you really need several, and you need to keep going back in order to benefit from acupuncture. It's kind of a process. Anyway, I was in Las Vegas, and I was having a horrible headache, and this coworker said, "Get up on the table. I'm going to do some Reiki on you." Now, I had never heard really much about Reiki. I knew about it, but I didn't really know much about it at that point in my life. And I sat down, and he started, told me to close his eyes, and he started moving his hands all over me. Okay. I will say I did feel things going on. There were temperature changes in different parts of my body. I felt vibrations in certain sections. I felt tingling or numbness in certain parts. So there was definitely things happening. The thing is, I got so remarkably sick that it took me months to recover from it, to the point that I ended up in the hospital several times with bleeding and all sorts of things that no doctor could even determine what was wrong. They sent me into a gastroenterologist to take all sorts of horrible tests, and nothing was conclusive. They kind of thought it was, ulcerative colitis at one point. And I never had anything like that prior to this little, interaction with this one session, this one time. And so can things go wrong with Reiki if the person doesn't know what they're doing? Yes. And I have seen sites, some of the research I have done in previous years, make claims that Reiki is perfectly safe, that the Reiki master, once they receive the attunement, they can't do anything wrong. They just lay their hands and the energy does the work for them. or they call in spirit guides or something to aid the process. All of this, from an exorcist's point of view, is disconcerting. Because do they really have the training, the skill, or perhaps most importantly, the koriki, which is a Buddhist kind of, there's not an English translation for it. It basically means that that one has disciplined their mind through meditation, through ritual, to be able to skillfully utilize these higher esoteric techniques. There is technique and art to it. It isn't an automatic process. And there are people out there teaching that it is automatic, that the spirits do it all. And, you know, anybody that studies high ceremonial magic knows that it just does not work that way. The direction of spirits, yes, it can be done, but skill is something that's required. So I feel, you know, and my big criticism of it, maybe this wasn't clear on Twitter, but my big criticism of it is the fact that not being regulated, not being licensed, you know, in any formal way, means that if I were just me, unscrupulous, and wanted to be a fraud, I could just go out and tell my 7,200 followers on Twitter, yeah, guess what? I'm a Reiki master. Let me do some healing on you. And who could stop me? Nobody. Nobody could stop me. I could just do it because I said so. And I feel there are unscrupulous people out there that are doing just that, and that's what worries me the most about Reiki. But we're going to take a break here, everybody. We'll be back with Kyla and Joy as we continue this discussion. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, to this second half of Vestiges After Dark. I'm Bishop Bryan Ouellette. We're talking about Reiki with Joy Keeling and Kyla, who's been generous enough to come on the show, talk about her personal experience with the field of study as a Reiki master. We'll be taking your questions coming up here in the chat room. Don't go away. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us through the break. So many good questions I am seeing in that chat room. Thank you for all your contributions there. We can look at some of the things that people are talking about here. Let me see if I can bring up some of the questions that I was reading through the break. Charlie was asking questions about, where was it here? Going back a little bit. We're talking about the standardized practice. Like Charlie asked, how can you quantify the qualifications? And the way that would have to be done would be through a standardized training. Okay, so the Japanese already have that, you know, if you go back to the ancient formula. And as somebody else mentioned, if I see it here, I'll say your name, that it would cost thousands of dollars to train, which is why they don't do it. And honestly, I think to a certain extent, there should be at least that much formality. I mean, getting a degree in psychology cost me a good $50,000, and you know, becoming a pilot to fly planes cost me a good $35,000. So, you know, there is, I think, to a certain extent, the need for formality and training, and that would be where you start to set the standards. Another way that you could set the standards is if you go into practice. So, you know, just like you can't like take somebody down to your basement and start, you know, remove their kidneys. I guess there's some people that actually do that. You know, don't get drunk in Mexico. I've heard of that happening out there.
Yeah.
But you know, barring anything illegal, I mean, let's say you had a kidney stone. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to come over here to my house and have me work on it because
oh no,
I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and you know, that would be a bad idea.
Definitely.
And so you want to go to a doctor who's been trained, a professional urologist, somebody that knows the territory and you know, trained and went through an internship and was proven under that program's guidelines to be qualified to be licensed to do that work. So the government license a doctor based upon their training, and they take a course. I mean, they take a certification examination, and you know, go through so many hours of actual study and practice. Then they get their license to go into private practice on their own. I don't see why that can't be done with Reiki. And Jean actually mentioned something. How do we regulate something spiritual? Well, you're really not. You're not regulating the spiritual aspects of Reiki. You're not regulating what Reiki is or how Reiki works. You're regulating what Reiki claims to do. And so if you're going to be seeing patients and bringing them into your office or wherever it is that you do this work, then that's what you're regulating. It's sort of like a business license more than anything else. And I think all of those things would discourage.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you for just a moment, okay? Because I do have a pretty good point I think I need to make, is that there are a lot of evangelical preachers out there who do exorcisms and who do also the laying on of hands, and they are not regulated.
But they
and
should.
So
Yeah,
that is something
they don't
that
even have to go to college.
They pretty much.
And
they are.
Yeah.
They're out in the field, and they are doing this work, supposedly doing good again, and they are not regulated.
Yeah,
Well,
and I have a problem with that myself, because of course I'm in seminary right now, and I'm studying for a Master of Divinity. They don't have to have a Master of Divinity, the evangelicals. They just will ordain whoever, and that's a problem for me, because I'm spending I'm going to be paying upwards of $100,000 for just this education, for just my master's degree. And I've had a lot of, classes teaching me, different ways of looking at scripture. I've had a lot of training to go behind all of that. And they don't get any of that. They don't even have to read the Bible. They don't have to know the Bible. They can just get in front of people and start screaming, and people pay attention. Mm-hmm. So I have a problem with them doing that and performing exorcisms because they don't know what they're doing, and preaching stuff that they made up out of their head. And that's why, it should be a little more regulated. So yeah, they're going around, they're wreaking havoc. Yeah, and people like me who are honestly trying to make a legitimate study of all this, we're put on the same plane as these people.
Well, and I can completely agree with that. Okay, regulating the learning of the craft can be done, but it's still a spiritual practice, and therefore you cannot regulate the spiritual practice of it.
But you can regulate how it's administered. You can regulate how it's administered.
The government can't see. The government can't see God reaching down and saying, "Yes, this is the person that I trained."
Well, no, but that's
not.
That's the formula. You could have two doctors in conventional medicine performing one treatment for cancer, and another person that has a completely different ideology for how to treat cancer, and they go about doing their thing. They both disagree on how cancer should be fought, but they're both able to practice their own different approach. Reiki can have its own theories as to how it works amongst the practitioners, and that is not what I'm suggesting needs to be regulated. What I'm suggesting is the methodology for where it's done, how the taking of clients is done, getting paid for it as well. You mentioned somebody mentioned in the chat room, which was a good point. We can kind of compare it to a certain extent, evangelical ministers, which I've been ultra critical of on Twitter, and people have tried to hand my ass to me for that as well. So that's okay. I think we're all in agreement that that's not an acceptable thing. But the fact is they're at least they're not supposed to be. Maybe some of them are, but they're not getting paid for it. But these Reiki masters some of them are taking in really good money. I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with getting paid for your time, but in the Catholic Church anyway, there's self-regulation in the sense that we cannot take payment for any kind of sacramental benefit. We can't charge for baptisms. We can't charge for exorcisms, even if we wanted to. Even if there are people that say that we should, we can't, because that's called simony, and that is a violation of the Christian faith to charge for spiritual favor. So I'm not saying that. I'm sure there are evangelical ministers out there that probably do take, heavy payments for the laying on of hands, and that's completely unethical. It's immoral. It is sinful. It just adds to a bad situation. But, at least for my world as a Catholic, which is a very regulated world, less so in my arena, but nonetheless, there's certain standards that one must maintain in order to maintain one's Catholicity. And selling, exorcisms is not a way to do that. It's not an option. So it's harder to regulate, or there's less of a need, perhaps, to regulate something because the government really doesn't care when money's not changing hands. As soon as money changes hands, that's when they want to get involved. So, if we're setting up a Reiki practice, I don't see anything necessarily intrinsically wrong with saying, okay, this is how it needs to be done in order to be considered a valid thing. Just like with a church. I could start taking donations and just set up a church and say, okay, here, come to the, the Universal Catholic Church of wonderful things, and, start charging people and say, well, not charging, but saying, here, donate to me. A priest in the, in this wonderful new church. I can't really do that legally until I have received a determination from the IRS that I can take donations, and they want to make sure that the church is a valid one by looking at what are its activities. Does it have a regular liturgical schedule? How many members does it have? Do they come regularly? What kind of services are being performed? Are they consistent with a creed? Does the church have a creed? If they have a creed, what is the creed? Does it match up to what would be reasonable expectation for a Christian denomination? These are all things the IRS look at for regulation of the 501c3. They're not telling me how to believe, and they're not telling me, how to use God's power. They're just simply saying, if you're going to set up an organization, these are certain benchmarks that you have to meet in order to be considered valid. I think that can be done with any system, and Reiki, I don't see it being impossible for that to work. And I think it would help to eliminate a lot of the fraud. And that way you won't have people saying, hey, look, I'm a Reiki master. I took this online course and I got it. Had a strong initiative. I got it in 24 hours. It would eliminate that person, because there could be a standard that said, no, you can't. That would be no more valid than a doctor claiming he went to medical school for 24 hours on an online program and came out with a medical degree. It would be no more valid than that. I think if you're going to do Reiki, let's give it credibility, and even if it's still considered pseudoscience to science, there is still ways in which it can be given more credibility, like acupuncture was once
chiropractic.
Yeah, chiropractic is another good example. Those are all things that it would actually benefit Reiki. I mean, it really would. Of course, it would probably require people to, put in a lot more effort in than they might want. But then, you'd have fewer people, less competition for the real ones. Then only the real ones would be left, because those would be the ones that are truly devoted and are willing to put their all into it. What I used to say on Twitter when I would criticize Reiki is that I would say it requires monastic level conviction. It's a life pursuit, because I see any occult science or art as a life commitment. It's not something that you do as a hobby. It's not something you do because you're kind of interested in it. You think it's cool. It's something you dedicate yourself to. It's a vocation.
And that is actually true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is very, very true, because, again, I've got 25 years of researching and learning and practicing behind me in the healing arts, and it is a lifelong commitment. So you do have to understand that, even though I have not, quote unquote, set up shop to have clients come in and lay down on my table, I give healing where it's needed, whenever it's needed the most, because I also have to live, and it takes way too long to establish a business and be able to survive on it. So I'm actually working as an insurance agent right now. But I do healing whenever it's needed, wherever it's needed. And no, I don't charge because honestly, I don't feel that it's right to charge somebody for that type of healing.
I applaud that. I mean, I applaud that. I really do.
If they want to give me dinner, though, I will never turn down food.
You know, even the certain things in the church that there are certain things that I do, like, for example, all the sacraments, of course, exorcisms, which is what I predominantly spend my time on. Of course, there can be no charge for that. There are things that a church can, be compensated for its time, which is basically the only two things that are allowed are counseling and teaching. It can give trainings and various other things. That's not considered simony. That it gives the church a way to be able to have a service that it can monetize to survive, because donations are far and few between. People do not give like they used to. Tithing, I mean, that's expecting people to tithe is a joke. They won't do it. They just won't do it. So the best that you can really hope for in order to keep a church, a church's head above water, is to try to monetize the little things that it can do. It can try to sell religious articles and various other things at a retail level, but it cannot charge for the services that it performs at the spiritual level. I applaud the fact that you recognize the value in that, and that gives a great deal, I think, more credibility into your dedication, and certainly gives value to what you say when you say that it's a vocation for you, as it should be. It isn't a hobby. And I think sometimes that even in my work, Kyla, I get people coming to me, Bishop Bryan, I want to be an exorcist. Can you make me an exorcist? And I have to take a step back and say, okay, well, first of all, do you have a vocation to the priesthood? And of course, inevitably the answer is almost always no. Or if they think they do, as soon as they find out the amount of work that I will put them through in order to attain the priesthood. And let me tell you, in the Nicolaitan Church, it's a lot more informal than it would be in the Roman Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church would put you through those doctors of divinity and, these $100,000 courses, which we can't afford to do. So we have mentorship programs, and we have an informal seminary program that we conduct ourselves, which is how we get around some of those things. But there's still formalized training, there's still standardized training, and there's still regulation to that training as per our requirements for the 501c3. That was another requirement, actually, in order to get church status as our designation. We had to prove that we actually trained our priests. We actually had a seminary program that they could attend to. And it didn't matter if it was a formal accredited college program or if it was something that was done on a more of a mentorship level. As long as there's the training of clergy, the IRS was fine with that, which, again, gives me a complete freedom to decide how would that take place. One question I've noticed in the chat room, and something that happened on a previous Twitter post, is why would I can understand for a non-Catholic, but I've also noticed a lot of Catholics getting interested in Reiki. I've even heard of nuns. There was a convent a while back that studied Reiki and trained their nuns in it. So one question has come: why would a Roman Catholic or a Catholic, when they have access to the sacrament of unction, why would they resort to Reiki? And the answer that I could give, I mean, you guys might have a different answer. I don't know. I'll listen to what you guys have to say about that. But my answer would be they wouldn't. Because the power of the Holy Spirit in the sacrament of unction is an ancient healing rite. It goes back at least 1,800 years, probably older, but we can trace documentation back to 1,800 years. Any other religion would be hard-pressed to find that kind of of consistent record, why would they need it? So my answer would be you wouldn't, because all of that can come the same way if you're willing to accept healing on God's terms and not your terms. So one of the challenges I find with we get this question a lot. In fact, it was recently on Twitter. The acceptability of mediumship, the acceptability of using divination, and Reiki is another example. When the church sort of looks down and condemns occult practice, and we have to first, in order to understand that, and I'm very open to it, as a Nicolaitan Catholic, we actually are not condemning of those things. We do feel that they require responsible use and certainly expert handling, but we're not going to come out and say, oh yeah, tarot card reading is a sin. We wouldn't really say that because we know better. However, that doesn't mean you should run to the store and get your tarot deck and start reading for your friends. I think that would be very irresponsible use. So that being said, when we get to these occult practices, why does the church condemn them? And it all comes back to one thing, that it tends to redirect the attention that we should give God to the object of the desire. So I want to get well, so I will then go and resort to putting my faith in a healing technique instead of just going directly to God and saying, I put my hands in your will. And the same thing with like divination. The criticism of the church is, why are you worried about the future? Simply just trust God's direction for your life. You don't need to know those things. Now, I take, obviously, a more balanced approach to that. But the reason I mention it is because there is some truth to what the church is saying. The church is not completely wrong with that. There definitely is a redirection of faith. And my concern is because the New Age movement gets very loosey-goosey about commitment and religious commitment and dedication to God, that there are, not you, Kyla, because I've heard you talk, so I don't think this really applies to you at all, but other practitioners out there that are doing this from a very strictly New Age sense tend to not recognize where the source of that healing ultimately resides. And if it's not coming from the Holy Spirit, then who are you getting it from? And I don't think a lot of people in the New Age movement are invoking the Holy Spirit, or at least the one from 2,000 years ago that was sent to us at Pentecost. I think there's a lot of spirits out there that claim to be Holy Spirits, not the least of which, let's just say none of them have capital letters. So what are your thoughts on that? Either one of you, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I do pretty much agree with a lot of what you said. Now I'm trying to remember what my thought was.
Take your time.
Basically, if you have to resort to alternative means, and I don't always agree with all alternative means, okay, because even if someone were to get a healing or to come through and to be a client, I always tell them follow up with your doctor, make sure that you're taking your medications, because I was a CNA at one point, I was a pharmacy technician at one point, so it wasn't just, alternative methods of healing that I was studying. I was actually trying to study other methods, and unfortunately that path did not quite work out the way I wanted it to. But, I always followed up with, just make sure you follow up with your doctor, make sure that, continue taking your medication the way you need to, because this is an all-inclusive, holistic part of healing, because now you're also paying attention to your spirit. And I think that a lot of people are fed up with our medical system being the way it is right now. Too many people are so happy. And then you have a lot of doctors that are just out to make a lot of money. So you get the good doctors who are, including the one that actually I see right now, who are overworked and have too many patients to pay attention to, that they can't be the good doctors that they really are. Mm-hmm. So people are fed up. They want a quick fix. They want to feel better, and they want to feel better now, because who in the heck in their right mind wants to feel sick? Right. Who wants to be in pain? Okay. And there's no reason why, with the medicine that we have now, that anybody should be in pain. But that's what I'm feeling. And so if Catholics are turning to these methods and saying, okay, we understand. We know you don't just want prayer. You want a more hands-on approach. We're willing to give that to you. And in a way, I have to applaud that, because people need to have that holistic approach when it comes to that healing process.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I think that's we do very similar with exorcism ministry. We, definitely access every avenue of the healing process, from doctors to psychiatrists, and even on certain occasions, the use of mediums. If we feel that part of the issue might be a conventional spirit attachment, non-demonic, but a spirit attachment, something that is latched onto an individual and needs some help getting released. Sometimes using the help of a medium has proven effective for the healing of that individual. That's something that's completely non-conventional to the Christian faith, and certainly the Roman Catholic Church would actually see as a sinful thing. But, again, there's some wisdom, I think, in studying this and not being afraid of it, but also recognizing its power and respecting its power, so as to not abuse it or to treat it in less than serious means. I've been fortunate that in the metaphysical side of my education, not the religious side too, I guess, but looking at just the metaphysical side of my education, I've been fortunate that all of my teachers were very serious practitioners. These were not people that, were playing games. These were people that this was their lifestyle. This is how they lived. They made their livings this way. And that gave me, I think, tremendous insight into the mind of what was required in order to do this, that this could not just be an interest. It cannot just be a hobby. Tara asks, so with Reiki and their belief in universal energy, is it not a form of divine healing? Well, yes, it is. The problem with the idea of universal energy is that energy is neutral. Okay? There is no such thing as good and evil when you get to the level of universal energy. All right? Good and evil is how we color it. Good and evil is how our intent changes it. But everything is neutral in the cosmos. And so the issue is, if a person doesn't have full mastery over those energy systems, then how are you going to be able to trust that they are going to keep them in balance? Now, some people undoubtedly have a talent for that. They might have just a natural instinct for doing it. But the greater number of people out there, I don't think that would apply to. So, and remember, in the New Age, everybody seems to think they're special for something, which is another dangerous aspect of it. And so when you have somebody who thinks that they are very qualified, even though there's nothing to actually validate that qualification, you're, again, dealing with some level of risk by interacting with them. So I would say, yes, it's a form of divine healing as long as it's done correctly. But that doesn't mean it's being done correctly. As I said earlier, these symbols that are being utilized in Reiki are sigils. They might not call them sigils, but for all intents and purposes, they are evocations. And if you're not evoking absolutely perfectly each and every time, those things open up doorways to worlds that you really would rather never experience. And that's, I think, where we're starting to see a lot of negative side effects from people who went to, a Reiki master for some kind of healing or something like that. So, again, no disrespect to anybody out there who practices Reiki. I'm just stating, from my vantage point, what I've had to deal with and how I've had to go about fixing it, because I am not an energy worker. What I do is invocation. Okay, so any priest or bishop in the Catholic faith is going to invoke the Holy Spirit, and we let the Holy Spirit do the work. And so when we have a client that has had their energy systems all screwed up by a malpracticing Reiki master or not so master, we appeal to the Holy Spirit to fix it. And it's a process. It takes time to bring them back to that point, particularly if there's an attachment that developed as a result of it. Because I can tell you right now, everything's energy. Everything's energy. Spirits, demons, the whole angelic choir, everything is energy. And everything that is energetic vibrates at a particular rate, and your resonance with those vibrations is what attunes you to any particular thing. So if your vibration falls too low, then you start to resonate too closely to things that are more what we would consider demonic. And if you raise your vibration to a higher level, then you would resonate with more of the things that would be considered divine or angelic or saintly. So, you get somebody that's messing with your energy systems. You get someone that changes your vibratory rate. If it drops too low because the person didn't know what they were doing, of course you're going to get a demonic attachment, because you're going to resonate so closely to the demonic realm that that's going to be the only spiritual things available to you at that point. That's the real risk. And that's why I've been so outspoken against it. Again, not the field of study, not the authentic operation of it, and certainly not people who actually make it a life commitment and a vocation. And I understand what Kyla was saying earlier about, having to survive. Believe me, I get it. I'm very blessed that I am able to do the work that I do right now, 50, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, which is almost like 2 full-time jobs being an exorcist. I'm very fortunate that I can do that and not have to worry about taking an income. That's not typical. And that's, again, God's grace that makes that possible. But I don't, if I had to depend upon the church to survive financially, the church would close because I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd be working some secular job. And if I was working a secular job, there is no way I would be in the type of mindset I would need to be in order to do the work I do successfully. I would be practicing malpractice at that point. Yes, exorcists too can do the wrong things. Even Catholic exorcists. I have seen it. I have had clients that went to the Roman Catholic Church. They came to me because the Roman Catholic Church screwed them up. So it's not a Reiki thing. Malpractice in the spiritual realm is a prolific problem. And only through regulation and standardization can we hope to even change that. Unfortunately, we're a long way off from that, and not everyone agrees on how it should be done. I'm looking at some of the other questions here. Does anybody have any other questions that you'd like any of us here to answer? Kyla, if you have a question for Kyla or Joy, by all means, let us know in the chat here. We've got Becca says, love this topic. Glad to be here listening with everyone. Just listened to 3 other podcasts. She does make a good point. I had to volunteer to clean a church a few years ago and heard a woman screaming. When I asked what was going on, I was told she was being delivered. After that, I was quickly ushered aside and pressured to learn how to speak in tongues. Needless to say, I ran. So, yes, there are people misusing their supposed titles in terms of spirituality. Unfortunately, that is an absolute fact. And that's not New Age. That's not Catholic. It's a prolific problem. Just like we were talking about the sex scandal with the church. Everyone thinks it's a Catholic problem. It's not a Catholic problem. The sex scandals are happening in every denomination, in every religion, and child abuse is happening in every one of them. Far more prolific, actually, in other non-Christian religions, believe it or not. But you'll never hear about that on the news because they don't care about that. The Catholic Church is the big bad monster that everyone wants to bring down, and sometimes they are a big bad monster, which is why I've had to kind of do what I've had to do in order to be able to do God's work successfully. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing any questions come in right now. In conclusion, Kyla, what would you suggest to anybody, regardless of religion or denomination? What would you suggest they could do if they do feel compelled to resort to Reiki and to seek out a practitioner? What would you suggest for being able to determine a genuine one from somebody who's just, using the title inappropriately?
Okay. Well, definitely go with your gut instinct. Because if you walk in and you don't feel right about it, leave. That would be my number one thing to say. Especially if they're boasting about things like performing miracles and stuff. Now, I've been on the receiving end of validation for the work that I've done. And one point being that there was a friend of mine who I was giving a demonstration on how the energy flows and how to visualize moving the energy through from the universe coming in through your body and out and into wherever you were directing the energy to go. And so I was doing this with a friend, and I said, I don't even have to touch him. I'm just going to hold my hand above his hand. And it went directly into the area of his body that he was actually having issues with. And he came back 2 weeks later, and he said, well, there was a bunch of swelling and stuff before I went to the doctor again, and now everything's fine. So I've actually seen it work to, help people and bring about those types of healings. But definitely go with your gut, and find out how long they've been practicing. And unfortunately, I was not able to find all of my materials to give you the name of some good schools where the initial training has come from. Because my house is a complete mess right now, getting ready for the holidays, and I make all of my Christmas ornaments to go on my tree. So my house is completely littered with craft stuff right now, and I was not able to get a hold of those things.
Right. Well, you can always send that to me, and I can tweet it out at some point in the future.
I'll definitely do that whenever I can come across it later on. But yeah, you can definitely, find out what school they practiced with, make sure that they are showing their certificates, and if they've got like all 3 certificates. Unfortunately, mine, like I said, I've got one from my original class, and then the person who took me up to Reiki Master gave me all 3 of my certificates without writing in the date on them. So, right. But you want to make sure that they have that data on there, and you want to know you want to see that they've been doing this for quite a long time. And there's got to be, different times between, different dates on each of the licenses, obviously, because that shows that they've been doing this for quite a while and that they've been going through and learning properly. You want to make sure that they have a library of healing methods and Reiki and, the different practices, the different Reiki practices that are out there and what they all do. You want to make sure that there's consistency in what they do, and definitely get those recommendations from other people who have been to that person. Find out, ask for recommendations from their clients and whatnot, and see if other people have had good experiences with that particular person, just like you would with any physician or, if you were going to a job interview, you want to make sure that you're interviewing for the right position with the right company. So anything, just the same thing that you would do at any other aspect of your life, you want to do that with energy healers, regardless of what practice they are doing.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think that's prudent in any kind of arena, as you said. You can't just trust what somebody claims. Look into them, find out. I know that I've heard other professionals in the paranormal field say very similar things. And it's good advice all the way around. You want to always make sure that who you're dealing with is who you want to be dealing with. And hopefully, through the course of that research, you find out that they're not dealing with anybody that you don't want to be dealing with. Because, that's one of the risks one of the hidden risks I tell people about with going to a psychic. I've had clients, again, something that's somewhat regular and frequent, clients that have gone to a psychic innocently, whether it be just at like a county fair type of thing or, one of those little setups on the side of a main street, and get their palms read, get their cards read, maybe there's some astrology or something. And, I don't have a problem with any of those things. What I have a problem with is that most of these people, again, have had no formalized, standardized training. They just picked it up and taught themselves. Maybe they got themselves the Idiot's Guide to Tarot or something. And now, after a couple weeks or years of practicing, they feel that, they could start making money doing readings because they had a few successful moments with their friends. Problem is, they're probably not doing anything significant to protect themselves from the energy exchange that occurs when a reader and their client come together. That's also energy. That's also a merging of energy systems. And if the psychic, who has seen all sorts of people, is not protected, then they're absorbing a lot of negative energy. Because let's face it, you're not going to a psychic because you want to, you won the lottery and you want to make sure you won again. You're not going to a psychic because, life is so wonderful, you want to make sure that it keeps on being wonderful. Most people are going to psychics because there's a problem in their life that they want to figure out how to solve. Maybe they think their husband's cheating. Maybe they think they hate their job and they want to find a new direction. They want to see if there's a new job in their future. Or maybe they're lonely. They haven't been in a relationship for a while and they want to go and find out if there's somebody out there. Generally speaking, people go to psychics when there's a problem in their life that they want resolving, and most of the time, problems have other origins. Some of the time, those origins can be demonic. Not all the time, but some of the time. And if they go to a psychic who is completely unprotected and they share energy during a reading, then guess what? The psychic gets all of that energy. And when you come in, innocently as it is, to get your reading, you get all of that energy too. Remember they used to say in the 1980s, anybody that, if a person has sex with someone and you have sex with them and you've had sex with everybody they've had sex with, they kind of like a warning against various types of venereal diseases and AIDS and things like that. There's a certain spiritual truth to that. Okay, if they're not using protection, you don't know what kind of spiritual diseases they might have contracted that they could give to you. So you have to be really, really, really careful. So I tell people, avoid psychics altogether. Don't even bother with them. If you're really interested in divination, take up the study, commit to the length of time that it takes, which is a minimum. It's a minimum of 3 years to really even scratch the surface of tarot. It really takes more like a couple decades to get to the point where, you can say that you can safely do it and have reliable accuracy every time. So that's just another example. Okay, so understand that I am sure that the same is true in Reiki as it is in any metaphysical art or science. If they are not protecting themselves against the negative energies that they're working with their clients, they can absorb them and it can fall into you, because there's an exchange of energy and it happens automatically, and it's not necessarily the practitioner's fault, other than the fact that they should have been better protected than that. Spiritual work requires protection, particularly when you are doing evocations or dealing with things that are less than beneficial. This is one of the beautiful things about the sacraments of the church, because they are completely free of any negativity. Only the negativity you bring into it makes it dangerous. So, that's just why the church, for example, requires that you don't go to communion when you're in a state of what the church calls mortal sin. The reason for that is not because the church wants to punish you further, okay? And the reason for that is not because they want to make you feel even worse about yourself. The reason for that is that the Eucharist, which is the greatest blessing that the church can give, becomes a curse to those who are not spiritually prepared to receive it. And you're not spiritually, when you are in a state of mortal sin, that drags your energy system low. Makes you vulnerable to demonic attack, makes you vulnerable to even physical illness, okay? But definitely mental and emotional disorder. And so when you're not in your right mind, the correct kind of mind that's necessary, the mindfulness that's necessary to receive the Eucharist, it can actually become a curse instead of a blessing. Okay, so it's not just psychics, it's not just the New Age, it's not just Reiki, it's the church too. Okay, we have to practice mindfulness. We have to know what the hell it is that we're doing. And we can't just go willy-nilly through it all just because, it seems cool and fun and exciting. It's dangerous. Spiritual world is a hell of a lot more dangerous than this one, because you're going to be stuck with that one for eternity. You're only stuck with this one for, 70, 80 years, if you're lucky. Okay, so we have to be mindful. And then if you're mindful, there's nothing that can harm you. Reiki would be completely beneficial at best and completely pointless at worst, but it wouldn't harm you as long as you have those protections. So honestly, I feel what it really comes down to in the end, and I will use this as my closing statement, whatever you do out there in your spiritual lives, whatever kind of things you dabble in or explore, whether it be Ouija boards or tarot cards, or whether it just be commitment to the church, whatever it is, do it mindfully, do it with respect, do it with full cognition, and cultivate that relationship with God. Because if you have that, you have nothing. And there's nothing anybody is going to be able to do for you. Reiki master, exorcist, bishop, pope, saint. There's nothing that anyone's going to be able to do for you if you haven't cultivated that grace. Because it's only about that relationship with God that sustains us. Thank you all. I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Kyla, for coming on the show. I'm glad that
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm glad it didn't turn into a big argument. I think we actually were more in agreement, as I thought. I suspected. But, Twitter only gives you so many characters, and it's actually a terrible forum to have a discussion on.
I agree.
Yeah. And Joy, thank you. I know you haven't been feeling well, so I'm assuming your silence is because of that.
Yeah.
Feel better, okay? I know what you're going through, and you have all our prayers.
Thank you.
Take care.
Definitely feel better, Joy.
All right.
Definitely. Well, God bless you all, and thank you again for spending some time with us this evening on this wonderful show and this wonderful subject. And we're not going to be here next week because of Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy holidays, everybody. I don't know when the next show is going to be. Advent's a very busy time for me, so I really don't know. I will try to at least do one show in December, but there won't be a show again in November. Just too busy, too much going on, too many things, and Advent's sort of my month off. So I try to relax and take it easy and enjoy the grace of God in the most wonderful season of the year. But I'll try to do one show in December for you guys. And that's about it. Okay. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I apologize for you being able to hear us bring Kyla on the air while the music was playing. That was not supposed to happen. That was just wonderful Skype integration problems, but hopefully it didn't detract from the show too much. Anyway, I'll talk to you in a few weeks. God bless. Good night.